kind of hard to tell. I see the sign. Welcome, everyone, and thanks for joining us for our Build Business 2021 Conference and Conversation Series, where we'll be talking all things build business with speakers conducting sessions this year. I'm Donna Jakubowicz, part of the Build Business Planning Committee.
And I'm Wally Heiss. I'm also part of the Planning Committee. And today we're joined by Cynthia Farrell, who is part of our Transformation Series. And our Transformation Series, as some of you know, is an on-demand sessions that will be available to participants immediately as the conference opens. And this year's conference theme is RISE, which stands for Resilience, Impact, Strength, and Equity. And today's focus will be on strength.
Cynthia is hosting a session on helping your team manage through change, a hot topic and something we all need to learn about these days. Cynthia, can you tell us about yourself and how you ended up where you are in your career today?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Donna. Thanks, Wally. So I am the owner and principal of 110 West Group. It's a management consulting firm based out of the Denver area. I focus on leadership, talent, and culture consulting in organizations, specifically high growth organizations is where I really enjoy spending time. And how I ended up here is through a number of changes and that I had to navigate my way through. I have over 20 years in talent and leadership, have been in a number of leadership development roles in organizations. And I had the opportunity in my last corporate role to get promoted to the SVP of HR, which is not my background. I want to be clear about that. I was in that role for 2 years. We were acquired by a public company, and you don't need 2 heads of HR. So I navigated my way into a package and used that as an opportunity to relocate my husband and I from Minnesota to Denver, and also made the decision at that time that just kind of wanted to try not being a corporate warrior for a while and get back to the work that I love, and decided to go off on my own as well. Love it. I love being on my own, love being my own boss and getting to work with my amazing clients. And the practice of leading myself through change with the techniques that I talk about in my session very much came into play throughout that entire transformation journey.
In your session, you're planning on sharing ways to build up trust in teams from the pushback that you might feel, even if you built a solid plan to help things progress. Can you talk a little bit about how you'll help teams align and not feel discontent or rumblings and pushback when you're trying to share a new plan? Perhaps speaking a bit about the managing of transitions?
So the managing of transitions is when you've got a team that's going to be going through a major change, that is going to impact them on a personal level. The more that you can do as a leader to be really clear about the communication of what's happening, what's not, is going to be really critical to helping your team lead through that change. That's one of the first things that you need to do. And the more transparent you can be, the more that trust is going to be built. Now, as you go through that, the net of it is there's still going to be changes. There's going to be things that they're giving up, things that we talk in the session about losses, the losses that come with change, whether it's a loss of a sense of certainty or a sense of identity. Imagine that maybe you are a marketer who is been assigned to a specific product for the past couple of years, and now there's a big reorg, and now you're assigned to a new product that you don't know. Your sense of certainty, your sense of identity, that all changes, and there's losses that come with that. So the most important thing you can do as a manager, and I talk about this in the session, the most important thing you can do as a leader is to acknowledge those losses, whether they're real or perceived, and help the individual work through them using the transitions model.
That's awesome. Cynthia, today's topic is about strength. And could you maybe talk a little bit about how strength fits into the whole notion of managing through change and through transitions?
Absolutely. Strength is it's so inherent every time we're going through change. And when we think about change, we think about, like, I show a visual in the presentation of like dropping the plumb line through all the changes that we're going through at one point in time. And we're always going through changes, right? And we're always going through multiple changes. The more changes that we're going through at a certain point in time, the more change resilience we need to have, the more strength we need to build in order to navigate our way through those changes. And so using the transition model that I talk about in my session gives you the framework and the language to help identify on a personal level where you're at in the transition model with various different changes. And when you recognize where you're at and you can put language to it, that gives you the tools and the strength to be able to lead yourself and then your team through it. And I always start with talking about leading yourself, because you can't lead others through change until you've gotten pretty good at leading yourself through change as well.
I love that.
That's a really great advice, Cynthia. So I guess to kind of take that to the next step, any words of wisdom that you could share with people listening today who might be dealing with some change or a transition and they can't wait for a month to listen to your session?
Absolutely. My session is based on the book Managing Transitions by William Bridges. That's the transitions model is based on Bridges' work. There's actually 2 books. You can get them both, from your bookseller. One that's more related to personal change, which is how Bridges initially built his model. And then Managing Transitions is really for leaders and managers to help lead their teams through change. I refer to that book in my presentation because there's only so much I can get into in 45 minutes. I think the advice that I have for people is to, and you can Google it and dig in online and you'll find all sorts of articles about this model. There is so much power and strength in understanding the model and, again, giving language to it. Because if I am going through something, I'll give you an example. So when I moved to Denver 2 years ago, exciting change. I mean, transitions happen even in positive change. That was an exciting change. We wanted to move, but we were leaving our friends and our community behind. We were leaving our patterns behind of when and where we went to the grocery store, our routines, our sense of identity. We weren't Minnesotans anymore, yet we really weren't Coloradans yet either. I'll tell you, the most challenging thing that just drove me crazy was my frustration at being able to find a dentist that I trusted. Okay, so here, what that changes, what I was resisting there when I was getting frustrated is I wasn't resisting the change of moving to Colorado and having to find a new dentist. I was resisting that loss of trust that I had with the dentist that I've had for 25 years. I've been teaching transitions for almost a decade now, so I have the language to talk about it. So I can identify that and reflect and say, okay, I'm frustrated here because I'm reacting to this perceived loss. Now let's figure out how I'm going to manage through it. When you have the language to be able to identify things, I think it both takes some of the power away of things that might be causing you distress, as well as gives you the tools to move forward. So, just grounding yourself in that transitions model between now and when you watch the session, and getting familiar with some of the language is going to be incredibly important. Every time I talk about this with people, the feedback I get is, wow, this is so powerful and this applies to me today. Of course it does, because we're all going through change.
Of course. I can't wait to watch your session.
Thank you. I obviously love talking about it too.
Yeah. So I know a topic that everyone is tired of talking about is the pandemic. I'm wondering, besides being remote, how has the pandemic changed how you go about doing your business? How has it impacted this transitional model?
It has, it's impacted me very significantly. I mean, so I went independent 2 years ago. It was 2 years in June. And so for the first almost year, everything was great. I was traveling to see clients, had that in-person opportunity, and then everything shut down. And I sit there and I think about, I mean, there were periods last spring when I was just I was completely paralyzed. I didn't know what to do. And I'm sitting here thinking, okay, I have the tools, I have the knowledge to help manage myself through this. What does this have to be like for people who don't have that? I mean, it's just incrementally harder. I had to adapt. I had to go through my own transition. So for example, one of my clients, I was facilitating strategic planning with them. We signed the contract right before everything shut down. The plan was for me to be in person for a week with these giant posters that I used to facilitate the process, all the sticky notes and everything. Mm-hmm. And that wasn't going to happen. So I had to quickly find some other solutions. I found an online platform that facilitates online collaboration. I changed my structure of how I do the work. And it went okay. I mean, we got there. It took a lot longer. We had to do a lot of 3-hour sessions over the period of about 8 months. But we did get there and we got a great result. Would it have been more efficient if we had been able to be in person? Absolutely. We would have gotten there a lot faster. It would have been a lot more engaging. I learned so much from that about how I can continue to adjust my work to meet my clients where they're at. So for example, I have a client right now that's global. They can't come, even if we were all coming together, they can't come together. So using some of these same tools to be really creative about how we engage. And that's required me to shift. The biggest change for me from a transition perspective is I do love being with people. I love facilitating groups. I get energy from groups. Not getting that in person, I had to find other ways to maintain that and to build up my energy. So that was probably the biggest transition for me.
Can I ask you a question, Cynthia, just to kind of pick up on that? Getting energy from groups, right? Now we're on the back end, okay? And many of us are migrating back to an office setting. So, and that's change again, right? Would share any comments or advice for us in terms of getting back to where we might have been 18 months ago?
You're not going to get back there. You're not going to get back to where you were because it's all different, right? Good. This is where I think I've been thinking about this a lot. Thank you for the question. This is where I think the transitions model is going to be really important for leaders to keep in mind with their teams to help make that transition back into the office or hybrid or whatever that looks like to make that easier. I talk about in the transitions model, there's this concept of losses that we talk about with transitions. You have to end before you begin. You start with an ending. So the ending here is that you are ending your 100% work from home arrangement, right? As you have that ending, there are losses that are associated with that. And you may be super excited to get back into the office and be with people, but maybe for the past year, you've also had an extra 2 hours a day with your kids because you weren't commuting. Or maybe every time you had a stressful call, you were able to hang up and go pet your dog or walk your dog or snuggle with your cat. Or maybe you were able to have a mid-morning coffee with your spouse. And now you're not going to be able to do those things anymore. And those are going to be losses of routine, losses of connection, losses of coping mechanisms. And it's all going to be fine. But the most important thing that a leader can do is to acknowledge that and to say, okay, we're coming back into the office. What are some of the things you're going to miss about how it's been for the past year? We all know the things we're going to enjoy about being back in the office, if that's the sort of environment we like. But what are some of the things that we're going to miss? Let's talk about that. And then what are you going to do to help make up for that? Are you going to commit to, maybe you're going to take the dog for a walk in the mornings, or maybe you're going to, find a different way to carve out some time with kids. Being able to talk about that, we talk in the transitions model, you can't ever skip the transition, but you can migrate through it a little bit faster and with a little bit less stuff. And that, I think, is going to be really crucial as people come back into the office to acknowledge that even if it's a good change, it's change and people are going to react to that.
That's awesome. That really is. I had not thought about a lot of that in terms of loss. So especially good for me. Thank you.
Yeah, no, I agree. My cat sits on my lap all day at work.
Right?
It's going to be a bigger loss for him, I think.
Exactly. And we don't think about these things because when we think about change, we think about negative change, change that is stressful to us. But even if it's positive change, I mean, you think about if you get a promotion, right? That's a positive change. But again, now your relationships with people are changing. Your sense of identity and certainty are changing. There's just so much that shifts with that. And when we talk about with the transitions model, people don't resist change. They resist the transition. And so as a leader, if you can help people, and when people are resisting transition, productivity dips. So if as a leader, you can help to, again, you're not going to eliminate it, but to shorten and lessen the depth of that productivity dip by helping your team lead through or manage through change, that's your number one job in times of change. Because that has a bottom line impact.
Well, I would like to thank you for joining us today. I'm not sure what happened to Wally, but it looks like it's just you and me, Cynthia.
Perfect.
So thank you for joining us. We appreciate the time that you took, and I am really looking forward to your session. This transformation is never ending. So learning how to manage it is personally exciting to me. So thank you very much. And I'll watch your session soon.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Donna.
Thanks, everyone.